In a dark world filled with deceit, one united voice is crying out. Revealing the truth of God's Word. It's time to expose the hidden truth and unravel the lies. While we're living beyond Satan's little season. With Sister Crystal and Brother Phil.
Welcome to Living Beyond Satan's Little Season show. We're your hosts,
Sister Crystal,
Brother Phil. The topic today, New Earth. How big is it? We're going to go over some size and dimensions today, what New Earth is all about. It's crazy numbers here.
right?
It's number crunching time. Get your calculators out.
I was gonna say, get your measuring tape out because it's huge.
The Bible gives actually a lot of dimensions, believe it or not, and I believe those dimensions are given to us for a very good reason. Nothing in the Bible is put there without a reason. When you read scripture and you get these dimensions, I'm like, why are these dimensions here? They're there for a reason. And I think what is revealed in Ezekiel and Revelation about the size of New Earth, and we don't know the exact size of New Earth, as a matter of fact. We only get a glimpse on how much it looks like it's going to be for the allotment
Right.
of the inheritance of just all the tribes of Israel, and it's a massive number.
And that's just, I'd say you could even say that maybe half the size, because then you have all the Gentiles and people that have lived since then that will need to be placed there as well.
We don't know how big New Earth is exactly, but we can get some clues that it's much larger than the Earth is that we're living on right now.
Right.
That's how you know. Basically, I'm going to prove today that New Earth is not this Earth, and the numbers do not lie.
Well, the most fascinating thing about learning about the size and the breadth and width and height of all of this is that this is additional proof that where we are going is an actual place and not just some pie in the sky place in heaven.
We're going to start in Revelation chapter 21.
Okay.
Talk about the dimensions of this is just New Jerusalem, one city. And we're basing our numbers off that one city because then you can extrapolate based on that information what the size of and the dimensions of all the tribes of Israel.
So it's the major city.
Yeah, it's his capital city, and that capital city is huge.
Right.
It's enormous. So let's go ahead and read here in Revelation chapter 21, verses 12 through 16, and it gives us dimensions and some details about New Jerusalem there. Go ahead.
It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. The city lies 4 square, its length the same as its width, and he measured the city with his rod. 12,000 stadia. Its length and width and height are equal.
We're getting a number on the city, 12,000 stadia, north, south, east, west. Now the next question obviously is, well, how big is a stadia? Because we, in our day and age, we're using kilometers or miles. We're not using stadia for anything. But in the Greek days, in the Greek and Roman era, that was their version of a mile or a kilometer, is the stadia. And that's where, today we get that word stadium. Mm-hmm. The stadium comes from this word stadia, which is the largest length of size they had.
Right.
And one stadia is apparently, you can even just Google this if you want, because I'm not going to really get into it. but it's pretty easy. It's about an eighth of a mile is one stadia. You have 12,000 stadia on each side, and that puts New Jerusalem about 1,500 miles on each direction, 2,400 kilometers each direction. So you got about 2,400 kilometers each direction, or about 1,500 miles each direction. That's kind of how it works. On the north side of the wall, with 3 gates on there, it's 1,500 miles. And on the west side, 1,500 miles with 3 gates on that side. On the south, it's 1,500 miles with 3 gates on that side. East, it's 1,500 miles.
So it's equal proportions. All the gates are equal size. Nothing is bigger or larger.
That puts the city at a staggering 2,250,000 square miles.
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine a city that large, okay? That's how many, or around 5,827,000 square kilometers. Just to put that in perspective, okay? I'm trying to get these numbers out because then a lot of times we know what kilometers, we know what miles are, but we really don't know what these stadias are. When you convert that over to miles or kilometers, like we can, what we're working with today, it's a staggering number. The number gets bigger as we go on. An idea of, okay, we know how big that one city is. This tells us, okay, there's more to it. What about the tribes of Israel and what they're going to receive? Because they're getting a land inheritance.
Right. According
to Ezekiel, and the very last chapter of Ezekiel actually talks about that, okay? Ezekiel 48. And this is we're going to go into Ezekiel 48 now. We're going to go into some serious numbers there because Ezekiel is using basically a different measure. He doesn't name his measure. He puts the size of New Jerusalem in Ezekiel chapter 48. He gives the size of New Jerusalem here,
right?
But it's not in kilometers, miles, or stadia because that was, remember, that predates all that stuff,
right?
In Ezekiel's time, he didn't have kilometers. He didn't have miles. He didn't even have stadia back then. He made up a number. Okay. Matter of fact, he doesn't even call it anything. Yeah, he made up, and that's why I call it a kilocubit, because there's no. He just doesn't put a reference to it.
Okay.
He doesn't say what this number is. He just says this is how big it is.
What this amount is.
Yeah, and so how do we get that amount? Well, we get that amount from Revelation, and then we can extrapolate. Based on what Ezekiel said. Now we're going to go to Ezekiel 48:16. And it gives the dimensions of New Jerusalem there. So let's go ahead and read that one here real quick. Ezekiel 48:16. And you can read in your Bibles too. And I'm just so you know that I'm not lying about these numbers here. Okay, go ahead.
And these shall be its dimensions. From the northern side, 4,500. From the southern side, 4,500. And from the eastern side, 4,500. And from the western side, they shall measure 4,500.
Okay, so this 4,500 in measure is what it's called, is the same as the 12,000 stadia in Revelation. Okay, so now we got something to go on here. All we have to do is just do a little bit of math and figure out, well, this number, this 4,500 is equal to the 12,000.
Right.
Okay? I mean, I want everyone to kind of follow me along because it's not really complicated to understand this. The 4,500 in measure that Ezekiel's talking about is equivalent to 12,000 stadia in the book of Revelation.
So it's obvious whatever Ezekiel is measuring with was, I guess it was much larger.
Well, yeah, because a stadia was about, we talked earlier, it's about an eighth of a mile.
Right.
Well, this puts one of these kilocubits is what I call it. There's no word for it. I'm just going to call it a kilocubit because puts it at about a third of a mile.
Okay.
So each 4,500 is about a third of a mile.
Okay.
Okay, so I hope that makes sense because I'm trying to put these numbers in areas that we can understand here. Or about a little over a half a kilometer is Ezekiel's number. It's about 0.53 kilometers in size for people that aren't, Americans that, use the kilometers.
Everyone measures things in different
But
ways.
So we have a baseline to understand, okay, these numbers here. In the book of Ezekiel, he gives the dimensions and how big the allotment is to each of the 12 tribes, actually the 13 tribes of Israel.
Right.
Okay.
Because Joseph's sons.
Yeah. So we're going to go over that now. But before we do that, we're going to read, and I'm going to verify that this number in Ezekiel 48:16 that we just read is talking about New Jerusalem, because the gates are mentioned there in this city, 3 on the right. And if you go down a little bit further into the chapter,
right,
at the very matter of fact, the last paragraph of the chapter of the book of Ezekiel, he gives the dimensions again. So there's absolutely should be no doubt in your mind,
right,
that this is these dimensions are talking, these kilocubit dimensions are talking about
the same thing.
Same thing.
Right.
It's got to be New Jerusalem, gates on each side. Okay, so let's go ahead and read Ezekiel 48 again. We've done that in a previous show, but Ezekiel 48 verses 30 through 35, and this should verify in your mind that whatever these dimensions that Ezekiel's giving, they are talking about New Jerusalem. This is the evidence that proves that this is New Jerusalem here. So go ahead and read Ezekiel 48 verses 30 through 35 there.
And these are the outlets of the city. The ones towards the north, 4,500 in measure. And the gates of the city by the names of the tribes of Israel. 3 gates towards the north, the gate of Reuben, 1, the gate of Judah, 1, and the gate of Levi, 1. And the ones towards the east, 4,500 and 3 gates, the gate of Joseph, 1, the gate of Benjamin, 1, and the gate of Dan, 1. And the ones towards the south, 4,500 in measure, and 3 gates, the gate of Simeon, 1, the gate of Issachar, 1, and the gate of Zebulun, 1. And then the ones towards the west, 4,500 in measure, 3 gates, the gate of Gad, 1, the gate of Asher, 1, and the gate of Naphtali, 1. And the circumference, 8,000, and the name of the city from which every day it takes place shall be its name.
Now, what's interesting is some translations actually put this number into cubits.
Okay.
This is, the translators that do this aren't being accurate.
Okay.
And here's how I know they're not being accurate. If you go into Greek or the Hebrew, there's no cubits mentioned there at all. Matter of fact, we all know cubits is about the span of your arm length. Mm-hmm. You know, from your elbow to the tip of your finger.
Your forearm.
Which I think, from what I understand, it's around 20 to 22 inches, right around in that area, okay? Measurement is used at any place in the Bible.
Right.
It's used the most. And guess which book it is?
That it's used in?
Ezekiel.
Ah.
Ezekiel uses the measurement of cubits more than any other book of the Bible. Cubits are used 254 times all over the Bible.
Well, kind of the question would make sense. Was it used when they were talking about the measurements of the ark, or?
Yeah. I mean, it was used back then. It's used a number of other places. Remember, like 254 times all over the Bible.
Uh-huh.
Now, in the book of Ezekiel, it's used a staggering 98 times.
Wow.
But here's the kicker. In Ezekiel 40 through 46, all those 98 times.
Okay.
But then when you get to the final chapter of Ezekiel, where it's talking about the dimensions of New Jerusalem and the allotment given to the tribes of Israel, it's not mentioned there at all.
Wow.
This is a little detail, but yet some versions of the Bible will actually put that in there. Now, you know, I've gone over a number of versions of the Bible. I've actually kind of thrown that in there in this last chapter that we're talking about here in Ezekiel 48. And, you know, like the NASB, the New English Translation, NIV, New King James, we'll put it in italics. I noticed they italicized because it wasn't in the original language, but they're just adding that in.
Right.
Okay. See, this is how these sneaky guys do this thing. They sneak in all this stuff, and it's like, well, that isn't in the original. Now, I do appreciate the King James Version. Okay. Here, they translated this right. They just put in measure. They didn't put they didn't put cubit in there.
Uh-huh.
Kudos to King James translators for this one. Sometimes I'm a little rough on the King James translators because certain things they don't translate very well. But here, you know, boom, they're right on. Okay. Uh-huh. They were translating it the way that it was in the original Hebrew and Greek. No cubits on this last chapter because these numbers are staggering. And a cubit would make it really small.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just trying to put these things out there. Of course, the New Revised Standard, English Standard Bible. Now, certain ones have nothing, which is really that's what it should
Neutral.
be. Yeah, like the World English Bible has nothing. Geneva, King James. There's a number of other ones. American Standard Version has nothing there. Bishop's Bible and a number of some other ones they've put nothing in there. Now, certain translations put in like miles. Which, they're just trying to. These are the more liberal translations that are trying to make it more. And some of them are like the New Living Translation, which I don't encourage anybody to really read unless you just want to have some fun reading. It's a very popular version these days. The New Living Translation.
It seems like it's more realistic to our times now.
But they try to like update everything to try to do thought for thought rather than word for word. And I prefer not to do that because you start adding in things that aren't there.
Right. Well, it makes a difference when you're using measurements.
So the 12,000 stadia in Revelation is equal to the 4,500 in the book of Ezekiel, which I dub as kilocubit. Let's go ahead and read Ezekiel 48. And we're going to start with verse 15 and through 17 here.
But concerning the 5,000 extra in the width upon the 5 and 20,000, it will be an area around the wall to the city for the dwelling in and for its space. And the city will be in the midst of it. And these are its measurements: from the borders towards the north, 4,500, and from the borders toward the south, 4,500, and from the borders toward the east, 4,500, and from the borders toward the west, 4,500. And there shall be a space to the city towards the north, 250, and towards the south, 250, and towards the east, 250, and towards the west, 250.
Okay, so now we're learning a little bit more detail about New Jerusalem here in this one. That there's extra space on each side of the city. Mm-hmm. So, it says 250. So now we know how big the kilocubits are. We can determine that it's about 83 miles buffer zone around the city on the north, south, and east and west.
I was gonna say that they have I was gonna say a buffer, like a little leeway,
or about 134 kilometer buffer zone right around the city. Because I was thinking to myself, okay, if there's these cities with these gates in them, then there would probably be minor cities right around each gate. But no, God's designed it to where He doesn't want anything. He designed a buffer zone around the city of New Jerusalem, around 134 kilometers on the north, south, east, and west around it, so that basically nothing can be built there, I guess, or whatever else. Right. Did you notice here in the first verse, it gives the dimensions on what the Levites, and this is what we're going to go into here, what the Levites are getting here.
Right.
Okay, so
they were the priests.
Yeah, they were the priests of God and everything like that. But the Levites, priests, and what I call the navigators, which we don't even know who those people are. But this is what the allotment given to them.
Okay.
We don't have the detailed allotment of what's given to the other tribes because we're basing it on the allotment given to this one tribe, Levi. Here in Ezekiel 48, we just read the very first verse. But concerning the 5,000 extra in the width upon the 5 and 25,000. So here there's 5 and 25,000 kilocubits. That's a massive number there, okay?
And that's just for the Levites?
That's just for the Levites. One tribe. We know how big New Jerusalem is. And that was just 4,500 kilocubits. Imagine that the whole allotment is 30,000 kilocubits. Think about that for a moment, guys. Because here's a staggering number. Each tribe is going to get about a staggering 8,333 miles, or 13,400 kilometers around. That's 25,000. That's how big each tribe gets, which is, I did the math. I wouldn't be here if I didn't do the math. This is how much per square miles and kilometers each tribe is getting. 69 million 439,000 square miles. Or 179,800,000 square kilometers for each tribe. Now, to put that in perspective here, that's just for one tribe gets that. All the other tribes are going to get the same, probably the same amount. They all got one.
Equal, right.
Yeah, they all going to get one unit. Just to put in perspective, all the land on Earth, okay, that we know of, at least the one that we're given here, is about 57,400,000 square miles.
Okay.
Which makes more land given to the one tribe of Levi than all the land on Earth combined.
Wow.
Okay. This is mind-boggling here because, and you realize, so the total land on the Earth that we have is in square kilometers is about 197 million square kilometers. But yet we know that each tribe is getting even more than that.
And that would make sense because this is our forever home.
So now you add in the 13 tribes. Let's say all of them get the same amount, which is what I think it's easy to assume they all get one allotment. That makes the square miles for all 13 tribes 902 million square miles.
Wow. There's not going to be any overcrowding there.
Or 2.3 billion square kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah, no overcrowding going on there. There's plenty of land going around. That's why I'm saying when you start looking at these numbers here, you realize that it's enormous. It's big. What does this mean? Well, we're getting to that here. It's impossible for this Earth
to be that Earth.
To be this, because people are saying how New Earth is our Earth. It's gonna get destroyed in the future, and then they're going to recreate New Earth here. I'm like, well, then there wouldn't be really enough land for that to be even possible.
Right.
What I'm stating is New Earth is way bigger than First Earth. So if we go to Ezekiel chapter 48, verse 20, let's go ahead and read just that one right there. Okay, go ahead.
The whole first fruit shall be 5 and 25,000. By 5 and 25,000, 4-cornered, you shall separate it as the first fruit of the holy place from the possession of the city. Okay, so inside, so here's how it goes. I'm not going to try to read the whole chapter, but you can go ahead and read it for yourself. Okay, so here's how it goes. In the very northern tribe, right,
in New Earth, and it's going to be Dan is the first tribe up there. He's going to get his 25,000 square kilometers, 25,000 in measure, and then south of him would be Asher, and then south of him again would be Naphtali. And then south would be Manasseh, and then Ephraim is south of him, and then Reuben, and then Judah. And then just south of Judah, you have the tribe of Levi with the priests and New Jerusalem in the middle there. I'm just giving you what we have in Ezekiel chapter 48 here. You can go ahead and read the chapter for yourself. Really interesting stuff. Okay, and then south of Levi's area, is Benjamin is just south of them, and then Simeon is south of them, and then Issachar, and then Zebulun, and then the very far south would be Gad. So the far north is Dan, and the far south would be Gad. So it'll be from Dan to Gad is the length of all the tribes of Israel. So Gad is very far away from Dan,
right?
According to what we get from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 48. Super interesting stuff. Massive city here, New Jerusalem, and that's the only dimensions we have, and we're basing all of our numbers on the fact of what this is stating here.
Right.
You can look it up for yourself. I don't know why. I've never heard anybody talk about those numbers in Ezekiel 48 and do the math on that, because I'm like going, because nobody's thinking the same way I'm thinking. I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, why am I the only one figuring this out? Because no one's thinking, oh, we're going to New Earth, and New Earth is way bigger. And we're just getting a taste of how big this place is. Massive city. We're going to read a little bit of Ezekiel 48, verses 8 through 15 here, in closing, so you understand what's going on here in the city.
And from the borders of Judah, from the eastern parts, shall be the offering of the first fruits, in the breadth 25,000, and in the length as one of the portions measured from the east, even to the western parts, and the sanctuary shall be in the midst of them. As for the first fruits, which they shall offer to the Lord, it shall be in length 25,000, and breadth 25,000, and out of this shall be the first fruits of the holy things to the priests. Northward 25,000, toward the west 10,000, and southward 25,000, and the mountain of the sanctuary shall be in the midst of it. For the priests, for the consecrated sons of Zadok, who keep the charges of the house, who erred not in the error of the children of Israel, as the Levites erred, and the first fruits shall be given to them out of the first fruits of the land, even a most holy portion from the borders of the Levites. And the Levites shall have the part next to the borders of the priests, in length 25,000, and in breadth 10,000. The whole length shall be 25,000, and the breadth 20,000.
How long and wide it is.
Mm-hmm.
So 25,000 long, 20,000 down. So that's how each portion is that.
Right.
So you just multiply 25,000 by 20,000, and that's the size that each portion of the children of Israel get, as determined here in the book of Ezekiel. Now, why would Ezekiel even mention these numbers here in quite detail if they weren't important for us to know? Nothing in the Bible is useless. Everything has a reason why it's there. But see, nobody's been crunching the numbers. Nobody sat down and go, well, wait a minute now. How these numbers are massive. For 25,000 by 20,000, each one is a third of a mile. That's massive. That's like 8,333 miles in one direction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about how long it would take you driving to get that far, you know? I mean, I'm just putting it out there, 13,000 kilometers. How, we have nothing on Earth that is staggering enough to where we can go, how long would it take us to drive 13,000 kilometers or 8,000 miles?
Right.
That would take, just to get through one of the tribes of Israel.
Right.
That's how long it would take.
Right.
Let's say you were driving 100 kilometers an hour. It would still take you many, many days to get through just one of the tribes. I'm putting this out there because I'm trying to get you to understand we're not living, this cannot be New Earth here, folks.
Right.
New Earth is massive. And guess what? These are just the numbers that were given to just the tribes of Israel here.
Right.
There could be other Gentile believers outside this area, which I believe there is.
Portions for them as well.
Well, I mean, I don't know but if you call them portions or whatever.
Well,
But their land outside there, I think. New Earth could be an infinite plane. We don't really know. Because everyone who dies here goes over there. I was thinking about this. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Everyone from here on this Earth, when they die, we get resurrected to New Earth. That would have to be a massive place. Honestly, because it's not. This place would get cramped pretty quick. Of course, we understand that we don't have an overcrowding problem here. But God likes people to have plenty of room, and it doesn't want us all crammed together in stinking condos or high rises. I don't think God's design is for man to be living in high rises. No, He wants us to have space and room to live comfortably.
Right.
Because that's what he did with Garden of Eden, with Adam and Eve. He didn't put them in high rises. I'm just being honest here, No, he put them in a spacious garden for them to live.
Well, if this is our forever home, and this is their forever home, God's not going to be cheap on the size, and, he's going to make sure it's a comfortable place, because these people had to prove they're just like us if they were worth and their faithfulness.
Yep.
And so he's going to reward those who are faithful. And that's important to God, because he's not going to skimp on, oh, you made it, I'm just going to give you this little fraction of a piece of land here. No, it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be a reward.
Well, we know this hasn't happened yet on this earth either.
Right. That
all the tribes got these land. When did this ever, another unfulfilled prophecy, according to most people. Oh, this hasn't happened yet. Well, I'm stating, I know it hasn't happened yet because it hasn't happened here. It's never designed to happen here.
Right.
This world isn't big enough to even give a portion. Even one tribe, this isn't enough land. This world is not designed to be New Earth. This is what I'm trying to tell everyone out there who believe, oh, we're living on New Earth now, like these predators believe. No, all you have to do is do the math on this, and you come up with a completely different number. Now, of course, a lot of people will say, oh, these numbers are arbitrary. Why would 25,000 doesn't seem like an arbitrary number to me? By 20,000. That seems like a pretty specific number. That's why I'm saying these numbers are given to us for a reason. And he was specific to not put cubits in there in this chapter.
Right.
It just says in measure. They didn't have a name for the measurement here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he had cubits he used previous in his book to explain that. Oh no, these buildings are a certain amount of cubits and all that. But when he gets to this chapter, when he talks about the allotment of the tribes of Israel and New Jerusalem, he doesn't use cubits anymore.
Right.
And this is how you know. I think this is exciting stuff.
It's very exciting.
Because I want you guys to just read, look in your Bible, and just you accountants out there, don't just take my word for it. Go look at Revelation chapter 21 on the dimensions of New Jerusalem that are given there, and then go to Ezekiel chapter 48 and look and plug in those numbers into New Earth and the inheritance given to those people.
Right.
And you tell me if I'm missing something, because, I'm not a mathematician here, but it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out these numbers are huge and big.
Well, and they should be, because God, like I said, he wants us to know that the effort and the persevering that we're going through is worth something to him. And, when the Bible talks about he generously rewards those who are faithful and obedient to him, that's no joke. It's no different than if you work for a boss or someone and you get a benefit or something because of your performance. Same with God. He is rewarding those who are faithful and obedient. And he's amazing. His creation and the detail, the attention to detail that God puts into making sure everyone is treated equally. Every gate, every tribe is considered and equally established. That's beautiful, because what does it say in James? He shows no partiality. He loves everyone and is grateful that everyone who serves him and should be rewarded for that perseverance. And I just believe if we can read this and go, okay, there's no way it can be here, I'm at peace, because that means that there has to be another place. And the other part to all of this is we can study this as much as we want. We can write it down. We can look into it. But there is a huge difference from what you think you know than what you see and experience. Well, so we will get to see that one day.
Just to put the numbers out there, after you calculate out all the tribes, all 13 of the tribes, the amount of land that they were given, it's literally 15.72 times all land on Earth.
Wow.
On our Earth.
Right.
That, we know of. Okay, so that's how large this is. Over 15 times the size of all land on our Earth.
Wow. It's almost too big that we can even comprehend, because, even our own model or Earth, it's extensive. We even have a hard time comprehending the size of certain continents and their vastness. How can we even comprehend the vastness of all these land allotments?
All the land, 2.3 billion square kilometers? Or 902 million square miles of land for all these? What we're looking at is, and of course, people haven't really thought of that. Hey, everyone's going to heaven, most people think, but okay, if we're going to New Earth, then we got to have a much bigger place than here. Because that means everyone in history who have ever lived and died have gone over there. So it's got to be a bigger place.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Because, if you were to do the math of all the people that have existed in just the Old Testament, from all the fighting warrior tribes, and, the good and the bad and everything, it was huge.
Yeah, it's been a great... And this doesn't even count how long in the future the people will live and die. Okay? It can go on for eons. We don't know when or if this world will ever end.
Right.
The Bible doesn't give us any idea, but one thing we do know is that we know where we're going.
Right.
Okay, everyone dies here is going over there. So that place is going to have to be bigger. Could be an infinite plane. We don't really know.
Well, like it increases because we don't actually know how many people here or in the past have chosen to live for the Lord. We are maybe under the slight influence and thought that it's a smaller number because it seems, even in this society we live in, that the majority of people aren't really spiritually minded and holy living. So even if it's a smaller portion of people that will be entering and living on these lands and cities, or these gates and tribe lands or whatever, that is still just an outrageous amount of expanse.
Well, that's why when the Bible says the meek shall inherit the earth, now I know now I know what he means by that. It took me a while to figure out what's he mean by the meek shall inherit the earth. And now I'm figuring out, okay, I see how big this inheritance is. Yeah, the amount of land we have here is chump change compared to what God's going to be giving us.
Right. Well, and that's, again, what I said earlier. It's our reward. I mean, the meek shall inherit the earth. If you're not humbly serving God and saying no to your flesh and living a righteous and holy life, then maybe if you are doing that, you deserve this great reward. The amount of time and effort that we have to serve and go through the things and the hardships we have to endure, it does not equal the reward that will be coming our way. It doesn't. I mean, maybe some people have had to go through some really harsh and difficult things, but I still think that God is so generous and so magnificent in how he loves and how he thinks and provides for his children, that is just like amazing. And it makes me cry to think how thoughtful he is to what he wants to give us. And he has details upon details that we would never consider. And when we do put our eyes on this place, this New Jerusalem, I mean, we won't help but have tears in our eyes because it's even too magnanimous to even visualize.
I decided it's interesting that there's actually a buffer zone around New Jerusalem. This is the detail you get in Ezekiel here.
Exactly.
A buffer zone of 83 miles around north, south, east, west, all around it. So that, it's basically there's room. God's not going to cram us all into these high rises.
Right.
I'm not saying there won't be buildings on New Earth. I really believe there will be. But it won't be like what we see here if you go to some of these scenes from the Far East where people are living in these high rises that have 40,000 people living in them. There's no reason for that on New Earth.
Right.
It's going to be a massive place, and there's going to be room for all.
No overcrowding.
Yeah, I mean, God's designed it so that, we're not going to be crammed in like sardines.
No 15-minute cities.
Interesting details the Bible gives us that I don't think anybody else is really talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard anybody give a message on this. I never heard anybody talk about these numbers until I started doing the math and going, no one's talked about this. Why? It's because they think that we're going to heaven, so nobody cares. But what if we're not going to heaven and these numbers are important? Mm-hmm. Why would these numbers be given to us?
Right.
Why would Ezekiel be given these numbers and inspiration of the Holy Spirit to us today if we didn't need to know about these numbers?
Well, it is a huge thought process to really engage on because we've never seen anything this big. We can try to understand it, but like I said, it's not something that we can fully grasp because we haven't seen it.
Well, maybe some accountant can, that's listening to my show here can crunch the numbers a little bit better than I could, because I'm not really a math guy, really. I mean, I know how to use a calculator and kind of do some basic math, but I'm not really into crunching numbers like this.
More like an architect.
I'm more of a theologian is my specialty, but then I had to go, well, this is in the Bible, so this is part of what we need to know. And so I started to do that. But, I know this age, it's dark and deceptive age.
Right.
We must be vigilant. We must be manly. We must be fortified, standing firm in the faith, doing everything out of love, not only because it's biblical,
but because it glorifies God.
Join or contact us at satanslowseason.org. This is a non-copyrighted Living in Satan's Low Season production.